Welcome to Talking with Tatum. I'm Barry Tatum, and I'm tickled to have as a guest today an old friend and somebody who's a familiar face, particularly the folks up in the Watertown community. But we have the county attorney, mayor of Watertown, and UT fan extraordinary Mike Jennings. Welcome.
Thank you, Judge. Good to be here. This is my maiden voyage right here.
This is your first interview on television?
It is. I've got a face for radio, so.
Well, most people don't. Well, I do too. People can see that. But most people don't get to start at the top like you are.
Oh, I've reached the pinnacle, so I don't know where I'll go from here.
Well, like I said, you and I have known each other for longer than, I guess we want to count, maybe 35 years or something
Yeah,
like
I'd say longer than that, probably.
But in the whole time, or a good bit of that time, you've been the mayor of the smallest municipality in Wilson County, but in county attorney. But tell us a little bit about Mike Jennings. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? And how did you get to Lebanon, or where you are today?
Well, I was born about a block from here in Martha Gaston Hospital up at top floor, I believe, is what was the maternity. We don't remember a lot about it, but that's where I was told it happened. And I always remember, I think you know Mike Corley from up in Alexandria. Mike Corley and I were born in the same place about either a day or a week apart. You know, that's when the mother stayed in the hospital about a week.
Oh, yeah.
And I think my mother told me, and I think Mike said, either one of us was going home as the other one was coming into the world or whatever. Yeah. But we kind of crossed paths, known Mike ever since.
Y'all probably wore the same diaper that got washed out.
Could have, and I can guarantee you that I wore the same ones a lot of times at my house, although I don't remember much about that either. Went to school at Watertown, of course, and back before they had kindergarten or pre-K and Little Lights, none of that. Started off in first grade. Finished at Watertown High School in 1972 and came down to Cumberland College when it was Cumberland College, two-year school. Scared me to death coming out of a graduating class of 45 at Watertown to a school that had about 400 people in it in Lebanon.
In the big city.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I was somewhat nervous, but there was 2 or 3 of us from Watertown and then several guys from here in Lebanon that I got to know and be friends with, and wound up being classmates with Jim Goodall, the county clerk, and the late Quentin Smith. Yeah. And so we all went to school at the same time.
And, of course, you got a 2-year associate's degree.
I did.
And went on to, where did you get a bachelor's degree?
I went on to MTSU and got a Bachelor of Science and in Political Science, and a minor in Accounting and History. I've always liked history. Not real sure why I did accounting, but I did. And from there, went on to UT Law School, got married in 76 in between. 76 was a kind of a landmark year. I graduated from MTSU in May, got married in June, went to law school in Knoxville in August, and got out of there in 79.
Now, as far as going to law school, I mean, a lot of people have an aspiration of saying, well, I'm going to go on to college. But that's taking it a step further. When did you make up your mind that you wanted to go to law school?
I don't know that I can give you an exact time, but I'll tell you some factors that led into it. I thought at one time I wanted to do something in nuclear stuff. Oak Ridge fascinated me. And then I got interested in pharmacy for some reason. Don't ask me why, I can't tell you. But they sent me, the Watertown Lions Club sent me to American Legion Boy State between my junior and senior year. And that's a week-long study in government, and I got really interested in that. So came back here and had 2 or 3 political science courses over at Cumberland. Jim Dressler taught one of them, and I'm trying to think, he may have taught all of them I had. But in the afternoon, I would come down to the courthouse, and in one particular time, there was a murder trial going on. It went on for about a week, and 2 of the leading lawyers here in town were involved in it. That really kind of fascinated me. And then in 1970, I guess it was 74, the summer of 74, we had the Watergate hearings, and I kind of got, that wrapped it up for me. Yeah. I just enjoyed that. So I knew when I left Cumberland, headed over to MTSU, I felt like I wanted to go to law school, and that kind of geared everything toward that then.
And you wound up going to the Hill up in Knoxville.
I did. I always wanted to go there. Wanted to go when I got out of high school. And if I was scared coming in here to 400 students, can you imagine what I'd been up there? But that was when they wouldn't let freshmen have cars, you know?
Yeah.
And we were sitting at the supper table one night, and my daddy said to me, I'll never forget it. He said, now, I'll send you wherever you want to go. But he said, I can't be coming up there and getting you every weekend and bringing you home. And I thought, that don't sound like a very good deal to me.
Yeah.
So I began to shape my thinking into another area. And once I got to law school, I could have a car, of course. So
Right.
that was all right.
And of course, law school takes 3 years, and
It
then you
does.
have to sit for the bar exam, and so we're getting into the kind of the late 70s, 78 maybe.
We were right there in 1979. That was a stressful year.
Okay.
Graduating end of May, starting the bar review, and you mentioned off there Don Payne. You probably remember the Crossley Payne bar review. Took that for 8 weeks, had another 4 weeks to study, and then took the bar exam on July 30 and 31, I believe, in 1979.
It was 2 days back then. It's 3 now.
It was.
And then you have to wait several weeks to find out what the results were.
I did. I came back here and began to practice law under supervision, of course,
Who did you practice on?
with Rochelle and Callis.
Okay. Bob
and
Rochelle,
Bob-
Bob Callis.
Yep. And then I think we found out the last Saturday in September
Okay.
who we passed. Judge Alice was on the Board of Law Examiners, and Steve Brown was working over there. So Judge Alice had told Steve, said, I'll let you know as soon as I know who's on the list. And I told Steve, I said, well, see if he'll let me know. So I found out from Judge Alice through Steve,
Okay.
and got a call on Saturday afternoon while I was mowing the yard. Remember it plain as day.
Well, see, now I think it's done electronically.
Oh, yeah.
It's posted, and you and I are the generation where I got a heads up tip from Sam Edwards, and who had gotten the word from Judge Alice. We went down the next morning to the L&C Tower and saw it posted on the door,
Yeah.
just to make sure. And of course, it was in the Sunday paper too.
Yeah.
But so you got license, practice law officially on your own, but you
Mm-hmm.
kept working with Rochelle and Callis there for a while,
I did.
and we're getting close to when you started becoming mayor. But you're also starting a family somewhere along there. You got 3 boys.
Yeah, it took a while for us to get to that point. It was, I guess I was 31 before Brandon was born. But I started with Rochelle and Callis, and I enjoyed that. And then Rochelle ran for Senate and won.
Right.
And about a year later, they decided to dissolve their law firm. So I worked in Lebanon for a while and in Mount Juliet for a while with Bob Callis. And they used to joke that they divorced and got joint custody of me. And that lasted about 2 years, and I went out on my own. But that you can hear Rochelle saying that now. Yeah.
Chuckling about it.
Yeah. So that was but I ran for office in '82. I was Edsel Floyd was the mayor, and this was 1980, and I had just started practicing law, didn't have any money, and I said, you need a city attorney, why don't you hire me? And he did, and I made the grand sum of $100 a month,
Okay.
which is $100 a month more than what I get paid now as mayor. So that's the best paying city job I ever had.
Took a pay cut to become mayor.
I did.
Yeah.
But I ran in '82 and didn't intend to. And when I say that, Edsel Floyd had told me he wasn't going to run again. And he said, you ought to run. And I said, no, I can't. I don't want to do that. And then I mentioned it to Bob Rochelle one day, and Bob said, well, y'all do it. It might be fun. And so
Yeah.
I did and got elected.
And of course, this is 2025, and so I'm not too good with math, but that's getting 43 years. Something like that?
I just started my 42nd year, I believe, if I've counted correctly. I'm not sure.
All right. Well, that's probably one of the longest tenured mayors in the state, I would think.
That they tell me that. I don't think it's the longest either in history or now. I think there's somebody in West Tennessee He's maybe been doing it 3 or 4 years longer, but I'll tell you a funny story. My grandson Max, so you know, Max left Google to talk to those things and ask information. A lot of times he double checks me if I tell him something. But I came in from work one afternoon, he was out in the backyard playing, and he said, Peepaw, said, if you'll just stay 11 more years, you'll be the longest serving mayor in the United States. I said, Max, I don't think that's going to happen, buddy. And I hope to live that long, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, it's Watertown's a unique place.
It is.
For people who haven't had the chance to visit, it's a really fun town, and I've got some Watertown connections married into the area up there, and the people are friendly, people are down to earth, and people are genuine, is what I like to say.
They are, and Judge, a friend of ours, and a man you know up there very well, had a death in his family 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's been hard on him, of course. He was by the city hall the day before yesterday, and he was talking about how good the people in Watertown had been to him. And I said, Jim, well, one thing about, or maybe 2 things about a small city. Everybody's always going to know your business, but when you have a tragedy or something, people grieve with you, and they'll come and try to make you as comfortable as they can. And he was going through that because he's not from here.
Yeah.
He's a Yankee, and who's been transplanted down here and loves it. But I think it surprised him a little bit at how the community responded to him.
Yeah, I remember hearing Lyndon Johnson when he decided not to run for re-election in '68. He went back home to the hill country, said he wanted to go, said people know when you're sick and they care when you die.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what Watertown is.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. That's pretty good. I hope I remember that. Do I need to footnote you or whatever? Okay, but if I quote you, do I have to footnote you or footnote President Johnson?
I'm just repeating what Lyndon Johnson supposedly said. But county attorney, that's a position you've held for a good while as well. And when did you, of course, Bob Rochelle was county attorney, I think.
He was.
You. And,
no, Comer Donald was.
Okay, Comer Lewis Donald, who was our public defender for years. And but you became county attorney, I guess, when Comer got elected as public defender.
He did. Not sure when Bob gave it up, but Bob Rochelle, but he gave it up sometime after he was elected to the Senate, and Comer got appointed. And then Comer ran in '86, I believe it was. No, it'd been 89.
Okay.
Not real sure how that happened. I guess he got appointed public defender, and so he gave up the county attorney position on September 1st, and they elected me on the 18th of 1989. So the county was about 18 days without a county attorney, but otherwise they've had one since '72.
And you've been the one since 1989.
I have been very fortunate. Worked for a lot of good people.
And of course, I guess the county executive back then was Don Simpson.
He was another Watertown boy.
And of course now we're Mayor Hutto. Back then it was called county executive. I believe Don Simpson was in office. But during that time,
county judge. You go back to county judge
even before then. But the population of Wilson County. It's nowhere near what it was today, and we didn't deal with the growth issues that we're having today.
True.
What are some of the challenges for viewers who are listening, saying, what have you seen in the 35 years or so that's happened to Wilson County? For somebody who's moved in here in the last 3, 4, 5 years, how was it back then?
Well, it was much... I don't know if quieter is the right word, but there didn't seem to be as much, perhaps, controversy or as many things to that potentially create conflict or discussion or whatever. It was easier, I think, to manage, although everybody, the sheriff, the emergency management people, everybody had smaller staffs, but they didn't need as many people. Now they do, and probably need more than they've got. We're up to, I think, about 160,000 people. So that's I think when I was just thinking while you were talking there, I believe when I started there was 37,000 people in the county.
Yeah,
So we've gone up, what, 4 times?
right.
400%?
It's grown a lot.
It has, and a lot of that in the last 5 or 6 years, as
Yeah.
you alluded to. So
But Watertown, the population of Watertown hasn't changed that much.
not a lot. We're at 1557, and now if a civic club or something in Lebanon or Mount Juliet, or maybe, if I travel, somebody will ask me about that, and they'll say, well, we'll speak to leadership in Middle Tennessee.
Right.
And they'll say, what's your population? I'll say, well, it's 1,557 unless we've had a death or a birth today. so it's just,
Yeah.
it's now, as you know, the area around Watertown has grown
Yeah.
phenomenally. And we haven't done any annexation, so to speak, but there's probably 20,000 people that live within 5 miles of Watertown, I'd say.
And of course, you got a new high school out there,
We
which
do.
is a big draw for the county.
It is.
Plans in place for a new middle school, and of course, the
Yep.
elementary school has been more than doubled in size and modernized in just the last little bit. So it's a thriving community out there.
It is, and our school system it just shocks me that when I go to graduation, and I'll say, how many you got graduating this time? 75? And I said, no, 140 or something like that. And I'm thinking, I went to school, wasn't 240. I was in 4 grades.
Yeah.
So
In there. Now, another thing that you're known for,
that could be scary.
well, another thing that you're known for, and I noticed you brought your orange cup with you.
I did.
You went to Knoxville to go to law school,
I did.
and didn't want to go up there as a freshman because they wouldn't let you have a car. But you make a point to go to Knoxville pretty regularly particularly during football season.
I go every time I can. Went Saturday a week ago when they played, who did they play in basketball? But we beat them. Vanderbilt. How did I forget that?
It wasn't Kentucky.
No, but it's Vanderbilt, and we got revenge for that Memorial Magic down here. I've always wanted to do that. And my maternal grandmother would tell me about going to games when my grandfather was alive, and they'd go, and she'd tell me about General Naylor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to read up on that, and then in the early 60s and mid-60s, my job was mowing yards, and I mowed a lot of them. Mowed just about for all my elementary school teachers. But in the fall, you remember transistor radio.
Mm-hmm.
The more mature people out there will remember those.
Old folks.
Well, I didn't say it, you did. But the little thing about that big, and with an earphone, and you could stick it in your pocket, put your earphone in, mow, and listen to the football game.
Yeah.
And I remember a gentleman, never met him, from Sparta named Stan Mitchell, who scored a touchdown. And I mentioned that when I got home. My mother's from Sparta, of course, originally, and she knew the family and all that. And these things just began to weigh on me. So I made the comment somewhere in there. And I was very young, but I made the comment. I said, if I ever get a chance to go to the football games, I'll go to every one of them if I can. And I have.
And you've been able to do that now since when?
Halloween of 1987.
And you have not missed a home or away UT football game since then.
I have not. I've been very fortunate. I missed that one. We talked about Brandon a while ago, my oldest boy. He was 14 months old, but that was in effect his first Halloween.
Right.
That you could dress him up and, parade him door to door. And, So Tennessee was playing Boston College that day, and it was an early kickoff, 11 o'clock our time, 12 theirs. And I could not get a flight back from Boston to get home in time for Halloween, so I didn't go. And glad I didn't. Don't regret that a bit, but that's the last time I've missed. And I've been very, very fortunate. My boys like to go. My wife's learned to like to go. And of course, she was with me in Knoxville, so she knows how it is. Right. And because we were married while I was in law school, and we just enjoyed that. My boys all love football. My grandchildren now, some of them do. Others are growing into it, and so it's been fun.
Well, you've seen some awfully good times.
I have.
we've seen some awful lean times
I have.
of the last few years, but it's getting better.
It's getting better.
And always love to comment. And then one of the other things you do is you follow the Purple Tigers up at Watertown.
I do.
And one of the things, if UT's got a home game, particularly during the football season, I listen to the scoreboard show on the radio locally, and on Friday nights, you call in and give a game report from the Watertown football game more often than not.
I do, and I'm not sure how that started. Everybody else that calls in there is a coach,
Right.
with the exception of maybe Jerry Richmond, who calls in from Trousdale. And I don't know how that started, but I tell Gavin and the Coach Webster, I say, if you want to do that, you do it. And I said, no, you keep doing it.
You've got the face for it.
Well, that's right. That's right. So, but here lately, as we talked about a while ago, or I said more mature folks, and you said old folks, but I'm getting where some nights where they don't get me on there till 10:30 or 20 minutes to 11 on Friday night. Yeah, buddy, they're lucky if I'm still sitting there when they call.
Yeah.
But I pretty much enjoy it, and it keeps me in the game watching the kids and what they're doing. And I really do support high school athletics. I think it's a good thing.
One thing I want to touch on, you mentioned when you got an interest in law, you said you were over here at Cumberland, you went up to the courthouse, and there was a murder trial going on. You said a couple of lawyers. Do you remember who the lawyers were?
I think it was David Allen and Jack Lowry. And I think that's when Dave was working for the DA's office.
Prosecutor.
And what fascinated me was, and growing up as boys and young men, you argue and fuss and fight and all of that stuff. But in the courtroom, the demeanor was all, but those two went at it pretty good, and they shouted at each other. And I remember one of them had to leave the courtroom, I don't know, to go call a witness or something, and the other one said, we'll wait on you, like that. And the other one said, I want you to, and I thought, well, this is just great.
Yeah.
This is just, you can carry the playground into here, So, but I got interested in it. And yeah, I think that murder trial went for about a week.
Yeah.
And those two guys were in. I think Judge Roberts may have been, Hillard Roberts may have been the judge.
Something else, since being a county attorney since 1989, I've been thinking things that have happened significantly in the county since then. Back in '89, we still had a lot of gravel roads throughout the county.
We did.
And I don't think we have a gravel road anywhere anymore.
I think we have, for the last few years, caught up to where they're all paved. Yeah. And that's a good thing.
That's and Steve Armstead, I think, was the road superintendent at the time when that was started. That was controversial. There was also a financial crisis in the late '80s, I guess, or early '90s.
1990.
School system.
It was.
And so those were some long nights and a lot of emotions, I guess, about. And maybe finger pointing about how did we get into such a situation. But we worked through that.
We did, and one of the things that was scary looking back on it was I'd been county attorney 9 months. And I went to a lunch on a Friday and came back. I was over with the late Jim Kennard and Rodney Ollis. And I came back, and Ernest Laster sitting over there, and he said, I need to talk to you. Okay.
Yeah, Ernest Laster would have been the trustee.
Trustee. And Ernest said, keep in mind, this is May, and we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year. And he said, we got a lot of bills over here that need to be paid, Mayor. And he called me Mayor. I said, well, Ernest, pay them. He said, we ain't got any money. I said, what? He said, we ain't got any money in the school funds. So that started a stressful, perhaps the most stressful weekend I've spent doing it. But spent a lot of time with several people, but more time with George Harding than anybody. And George called me on a Sunday morning.
Now, what was George the county commissioner at the time?
George may have been the road superintendent.
Okay.
But 36 hours later, George calls me at home about 9:30, and he said, I got this thing figured out. And I said, well, okay. And he said, what are you doing? I said, well, George, I'm going to Sunday school. And he said, well, go to Sunday school. When you get done, meet me down here. So we talked about it, and he laid it out, and I peppered him probably for 2 hours with questions, playing devil's advocate.
Right.
and trying to figure out why it wouldn't work. And then at the end, of course, he just swelled up every time he knew he had me. And finally, I said, George, it might work. And then he commenced to tell me how it would work and
Right.
threw in a couple of extra phrases there, but told me it'd work, and it did.
And for people who don't know, George Harding was a fixture in
He was.
county government, city politics for decades.
He was.
And if there's a number of people who have passed on, I would love to be able to sit down and talk with. George Harding would be near the top, if not the top of the list on there.
He would, and me too. And I can tell you, and I don't remember the issue, but just a few weeks or months before George passed, we had some issue here in the county. And he came over to my office one day and just walked in. Of course, he was shuffling in,
Right.
couldn't hardly walk. But he came in, sat down, and he said, I'll tell you what I think about this. And in about 20 minutes, he had told me what he thought. I thought, that's pretty good advice.
Yeah.
And I think we followed it.
And a lot of people can say that about George Harding, but managed to get through the financial crisis for the county at that time. And of course,
We
we
did.
had this ongoing growth issue about infrastructure and expansion of government, increasing the size of WEMA and the sheriff's department and waste management and roads.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that strikes me is education. And I was telling we had a break at the school board meeting Monday night, and we were talking about when we built Wilson Central High School, which was the first new school we'd had in some time.
Decades.
And we built it a different method. And that was a little bit scary, but we got it done. But we've basically been building a new school every 2 years since then.
Mm-hmm.
And the growth in our students, and Director Luttrell said the other night, we're up to 20,600.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't count the people that are homeschooled or in the Mount Juliet Christian or Friendship Christian or the private elementary schools. So a lot of kids here now when there used to not be.
Right.
And
Well, the size of your high school class at Watertown going from
Absolutely.
45 to 200 or 145 now.
Absolutely.
160 is an example of that. But anything, I always like to ask folks that are out here that have been around a while. I'm not saying you're
you got somebody coming on after me? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Oh, okay. You asking me?
Folks, if you could sum up some advice to a young person, or maybe a person who's older, what would be Mike Jennings' mantra for life about change or being grounded or whatever?
Because I've spent so much time in government, I'll say this. And when I speak to the youth leadership class, I encourage them to get involved in government. And the reason I do that is, number one, I think they'd enjoy it. But, well, that's really not number one. Number one is good people have to be involved in government. They have to be. And if not, things are going to go south.
Yeah.
And people got to be in government. They got to be honest, and they got to treat that money like it's their own. Don't go out and spend it just because it belongs to somebody else.
Right.
They got to treat it like it's theirs. And we've done a pretty good job of that in the city and the county. I don't remember the last time we did a tax increase in Watertown, and the county hadn't had one in about 10 years. So if you manage the money well, people will trust you.
All right.
If you don't, they'll let you know pretty quick.
They will, at least election time anyway.
And they let you know in Watertown real quick.
Well, listen, Mayor, thank
Yep.
you so much. And
Oh,
there's
all
a
right.
gift with some a mouse pad and a screen wipe and a coffee cup. And
Yeah. Well,
appreciate-
thank you. Appreciate it.
your time being out here on the show.
Yeah.
Appreciate you being my friend.
Yeah, same here, Judge. And time passed quickly.
I know it.
We could have,
We could have gone on for another day or two.
yeah, probably so.
Right.
And probably told the people eventually something they could use,
But
maybe.
if we'd done that, then I imagine some of our viewers would have flipped the channel. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Talking with Tatum. Thanks to Mayor Mike Jennings of Watertown and our county attorney and UT fan extraordinaire. And until next time, I'm Barry Tatum.